February of this year, the Supreme Court struck down our nation's existing law banning assisted suicide, and it opened the door for its potential legalization. But the current ban will be in place for the next 12 months, and while the government considers how to respond, people of many walks of life are now debating the potential impact of legalizing euthanasia. To add to that discussion today, I'm joined by Dr. Michelle Korvemaker, an emergency room and palliative care doctor, as well as Larry Worthen, Executive Director of the Christian Medical and Dental Society. Thank you so much for coming today.
Thank you for inviting us.
Now, there's so many things we can talk about in regards to euthanasia, but we really want to focus today with the two of you on how it affects doctors and people in the medical profession. Now, you yourself are an emergency room physician, so I mean, you're on the front lines of how this may affect you, and also you work in palliative care. What are your concerns about this?
Well, I'm concerned that people will perhaps not consider other options. They may think, oh, well, that's the easy way out, or they may end their life sooner than they need to. In palliative care, our aim is to help people to have the best quality of life as long as they can, help them to deal with their pain and symptom management. And a lot of times when people bring up that they are thinking about euthanasia or physician-assisted suicide, a lot of times that means some pain or symptom is not being managed properly, and palliative care physicians make it their aim to figure out what that might be, try to rectify the problem, and a lot of times those requests for physician-assisted suicide or death go away because people are more comfortable, and people would potentially lose time with their family that they could be saying goodbye and remembering and spending time together if they were to end their lives prematurely.
Those last days are really precious, aren't they? And Larry, you represent groups of doctors and dentists, people who obviously are very concerned about this. What are you hearing and what are your concerns?
Well, our particular concern is, of course, concern for the patients that Michelle described, but also concern for physicians themselves and the protection of their conscience rights. Our members, and there are about 1,700 of them across Canada, don't want to have to be involved in this procedure because in many cases it goes against their conscience. We're very concerned because just last week the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario passed a policy that would require physicians to refer for euthanasia, in some cases possibly to participate in it, and said nothing about issues of discrimination against doctors who refuse to participate in it.
And this is not just in Ontario, in Saskatchewan as well. This is becoming an issue where doctors are going to be put in positions potentially where they're going to have to even perform in emergencies. They may have to perform abortions, euthanasia, or anything that goes against their conscience. This doesn't just affect Christians, does it?
That's right. It affects many religious groups, and not only people with religious background, but people who might have a humanist creed who are opposed to euthanasia. The colleges are taking a very strong stand requiring physicians to be involved, even though the Supreme Court of Canada seem to back away from that requirement. So we're very concerned.
And doesn't the Constitution protect freedom of religion and conscience?
It does, and so right now CMDS, in conjunction with many other groups, is looking at an actual lawsuit to protect physicians like Michelle, to make sure that they're able to continue to practice medicine according to their beliefs.
And that's a lawsuit that will likely go all the way to the Supreme Court if that's launched.
We hope not. We hope that cooler heads will prevail and reason will take control, and the college will realize that they need to protect the conscience rights of physicians.
Yeah, that's really awkward. The guiding principle and the ethical foundation of doctors has always been do no harm. And so when you're talking about euthanasia, doesn't that kind of seem to go against that idea, or is it harm?
I would contend that it's harm. There are people who would contend that it's not. A lot of times it seems that people who are in favor of physician-assisted suicide or euthanasia are looking to have control. They feel like they're losing control at the end of life, and they've always had control. So choosing this, they figure they're having control of their life.
You choose the way you die, kind of.
Yeah.
When I think about this, a lot of times when people receive a diagnosis, they've had a catastrophic injury, maybe they wake up without a limb. There's just different times where you're trying to process this, where you could be in a pretty low spot. You could feel pretty hopeless about life. You may not know that can I really go on without an arm and only have one arm? But you may find that once you get through the healing process and rehabilitation that you can. And we have people on the show all the time who have been in those places, suicidal thoughts, not even for a medical reason, but suicidal thoughts or, thinking they can't go on with their life, and they found a way to overcome. And we all celebrate their stories because they're heroes, they're heroic in their life.
Right.
Is that a concern that you could make a decision in a moment that you may not feel the same way in 6 months?
That's quite a concern. And there's lots of examples of that when people have catastrophic injuries or have a stroke and they have that time of depression, and they may come out of that later and see a reason for living. And it would be better to support people as they go through that process rather than saying, well, here, you can go and just end it, and not go through that time. And suffering has a purpose in helping us to grow as human beings. As Christians, when we suffer, we grow to be more like Christ. People who don't share that faith, they may not see that, but there is lots of stories or books written by people who've gone through hard things and who are non-Christians who've also learned through those times of suffering. So,
of course, it doesn't kill you, makes you stronger sometimes, hopefully, right? Larry, you have people in your family. Your wife is a doctor, your son. What are you hearing from them on this issue?
Well, they're very concerned, and I think that one of the reasons I took this role and got into this with such passion is I'm concerned about my son being able to practice medicine and still maintain his Christian faith. He wants to be an internal medicine specialist, and that could put him right in the line of fire in terms of these issues of euthanasia. So it's very personal for me, and I know personal for Michelle and for many of the members of our organization.
Well, you've mentioned that even this weekend you'd received some letters from members who are feeling quite heartbroken about having to make a very difficult choice between their profession and their deeply held beliefs. Tell me about that.
Well, we've had emails from members saying that they are in tears after reading the decision of the CPSO. I did a conference call with 40 physicians from across the country 2 weeks ago, where many Christian palliative care physicians are considering changing their practice. We know that there are stories of people wanting to leave to go to the United States, because many of the people who work in palliative care have a Christian or faith-based background. And the concern would be, if this policy is implemented, that they would be driven out of the practice of palliative care, leaving only people who did not have an ethical concern with euthanasia.
Yeah.
What's really important is the issue, and I want to stress this, of discrimination, because I wouldn't want it to get to the point where Michelle would be discriminated against because of her anti-euthanasia stand and not be admitted to be able to do palliative care.
It's like the message basically is, if you have any kind of a faith or a moral, ethical platform that would disagree with where things are headed, you are not welcome in the medical profession.
That's the concern.
That's really disconcerting.
Yeah.
I'm sure very hurtful. Michelle, you were saying earlier, and when we were talking before the program, and I thought this was really impactful, and I think it's true, is that a lot of people are choosing euthanasia. And, it's legal in a number of states in the U.S., it's legal in Quebec, and of course in Europe and different places. They're choosing it because they feel like they're a burden, like they actually feel like they have no choice, because they're going to stress out their family by staying alive and sick.
Right.
Tell me about that. Tell me about those conversations you've had.
Well, I think Larry was the one who actually brought that particular bit up. But in general, people, they don't want to be a burden on their families, and they want them to be able to move on with their lives potentially and not feel like they need to be taking care of their elderly parent but many people want to take care of their elderly parents, and they're doing a very good job of it. And I guess as a society, we need to make sure that people feel that they are important until they die, and that we shouldn't be making them feel like they are a burden. And if they're feeling that way, then we should be doing things to try to eradicate those feelings.
Yeah, because when someone's in the hospital, it is a pressure, it is a stress, but you would much rather have them than not have them. And I think that message about valuing life and valuing people, and those last days are so precious for so many people I know who've lost a parent or a spouse or a child. You don't want to be robbed of that. Another of the concerns that you hear about is the slippery slope argument, that once you start justifying killing to stop suffering, who decides where that boundary is and that
Right.
slippery slope? Tell me a little bit about that concern.
Well, this past summer, I was visiting both the Netherlands and Belgium, where euthanasia is legal, and it's been legal there for a number of years. I met with a Professor Theo Boer, who for 9 years was on a euthanasia panel in the Netherlands. He told me during the 9 years, he could see a progression where less and less sick people and younger people were being euthanized. And doctors were paying less and less attention to the details and the requirements. We also know that palliative sedation has increased by 100% in the Netherlands in 10 years. And what he said was that essentially what's happening is we have normalized suicide within the Netherlands. The pro-euthanasia lobby is now saying that anyone over age 70 should be eligible for euthanasia without any questions being asked.
And I hear, that people are even asking for euthanasia that don't even have a terminal disease necessarily.
Well, a lot of Canadians don't realize it, but the tests put forward by the Supreme Court in Carta do not require a terminal illness. As a matter of fact, a person with a disability could qualify. And that includes people with mental health difficulties. And when I was in Belgium, I was told a story by a Christian doctor there who told me he had a patient who asked to be euthanized. He said the patient would not qualify because he was chronically depressed. He went on to a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist said he would not qualify. The patient did not give up, went to the pro-euthanasia physicians. Within 2 weeks, he was euthanized.
Wow. It's really, really scary where we're headed. I know I've heard stories and I've seen statistics that say it actually is happening in Canada, kind of probably more in those situations where someone might be in the last week to live and the doctors might slip them a little extra morphine on the side and it's done. But you've actually talked to people who are in palliative care who are afraid to take morphine because they're afraid someone's going to make that choice that they're not ready for.
That has been expressed by some patients, yeah. And some of them think they're going to get addicted to the pain drugs and things like this. But usually we prescribe them in a controlled way, and we try to alleviate those fears. But there's a reason why we also limit how much of the drug we give at a time, because we don't necessarily know what someone at home may do with their failing family member.
Yeah, exactly.
I should just say also with palliative sedation, it's a tool we use in palliative care, but it's not used that frequently, at least in Canada. Like we'll use it as a last effort in trying to control someone's pain and symptoms, but I'm not sure how they're using it in the Netherlands, if they've increased it that much, whether that's just how they're actually achieving. Yeah,
there was an article in the Lancet, which is a medical journal, which basically indicated, there was a commentary that indicated that it's clear that they're using sedation as a means of euthanasia off the books in the Netherlands.
And that's not why we use it.
That's not why it's being used.
You know what? This is an ongoing issue. We're going to be following it. We're going to be discussing the different aspects of it. Thank you so much for coming in. I know a lot of people will be interested in what you have to say, especially in the medical profession. So we really appreciate all you're doing.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.